I am Claire Thompson, 28 years old, living in Portland, Oregon. When people think of me, they probably picture an independent woman with a stable graphic design career, someone who knows how to budget and take care of herself. But behind that strong exterior, I carry an exhaustion no one sees, an exhaustion that comes from my own flesh and blood family. I've grown used to being seen as the resilient one, the person my parents believe can handle everything on her own. I learned to stand alone, to ignore the favoritism they showed my siblings. But one afternoon, everything reached a breaking point. An afternoon that seemed ordinary until I stumbled upon a stack of Alaskan cruise tickets on my father's desk. My parents' house in suburban Portland still has that cozy feel, with its cream-colored walls and family photos lining the hallway. I had gone to visit that day to drop off some supplements for my dad after his recent hospitalization for diabetes complications. As I stepped into the living room, I heard laughter and chatter, the lingering scent of freshly baked cookies wafting from the kitchen. Thinking everything was calm, I set my bag on the couch and headed upstairs. The door to my dad's study was slightly ajar. A warm glow from the desk lamp spilled across the wooden floor. I stepped inside, intending to grab an old newspaper to pass the time, but my eyes froze on a neatly stacked pile of colorful papers on the desk. At the top was the logo of a well-known travel agency, bold letters proclaiming, "Alaska Family Cruise, Full Package." I smiled faintly, thinking maybe my parents were dreaming of a relaxing getaway. But as I pulled out the top sheet, my heart clenched. The passenger list was clear: my dad, my mom, my sister Harper, her husband, their 2 kids, my brother Cody, and his new girlfriend. I flipped through the pages, searching desperately, but my name was nowhere to be found. My hands trembled. My mind flashed to the $2,800 I had transferred to my mom just 3 weeks earlier. She had said it was for Dad's hospital bills, or they'd face debt collectors. Without hesitation, I had canceled my dream trip to Lake Tahoe and taken on extra freelance projects to cover it. And yet, laughter echoed from downstairs. Harper's giggles, Cody talking about his plans for a new car. Suddenly, I felt like a stranger in my own family's home. My heart pounded, my breath heavy, as old memories of favoritism and neglect came rushing back. I clutched the stack of tickets. The words danced before my eyes, sharp like knives. Balcony suite for Harper's family. Premium package for Cody and his girlfriend. Blood roared in my ears. Had I, all these years, just been a shadow they used and then forgot when it was time for joy and celebration? My mother's footsteps echoed from the staircase. I quickly set the tickets back on the desk, aligning them perfectly as they were. She appeared in the doorway, a kitchen towel in hand, her eyes surprised to see me. "Claire, you're up here? Come down and have some cookies with everyone. You're always working, rarely around." Her words faded into the air. I just looked at her, forcing a stiff smile to hide the turmoil in my chest. I walked out of the room, passing her without a word. At the door, I picked up my bag, took a deep breath, and summoned all my resolve. "Claire, where are you going?" my mom called after me, her voice tinged with panic. For the first time in my life, I didn't look back. In the car, I drove slowly down the familiar street, the streetlights casting blurry streaks on the windshield. Memories flooded back. At 7, begging for piano lessons but being denied. At 13, missing the Oregon Marine Science trip. In college, juggling 3 jobs while my siblings were fully supported by our parents. Now those fragments formed a complete picture. I had never truly been part of this family's affection. They needed me in tough times but forgot me in moments of happiness. The steering wheel felt ice cold in my hands. I realized the crack in my heart wasn't new. It had been there for years. But today, standing before those Alaskan cruise tickets, I could no longer pretend it didn't exist. That night, back in my small apartment, I collapsed onto the floor staring at the blank white wall. Part of me wanted to scream, to let out all the pent-up frustration, but another part was eerily silent. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of letting go of my final illusions. I don't know what tomorrow holds. I don't know if I'm strong enough to cut ties or how to confront this. But one thing I'm certain of: The moment I set those tickets down and walked away was the start of a new path. A path where I refuse to be a shadow. As I write these words, I wonder, how many others have felt this same exclusion from their own flesh and blood? Maybe you've been compared, forgotten, or labeled the strong one. If so, I want you to know, you're not alone. Please tell me, have you ever been in a situation like this? Share your story so we can find solidarity and understand that sometimes choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's the only way to truly live. They say when memories flood back, they don't come in fragments, but like a torrent. That evening, after leaving the cruise tickets on my dad's desk and quietly walking away, I sat in my small apartment, the dim yellow light casting shadows on the bare walls. I pulled an old cardboard box from under the bed, filled with albums, keepsake boxes, and yellowed stacks of paper. I opened it, and it was like unlocking a door to a childhood I'd tried to forget. The first photo I flipped to was Christmas 2018. In it, Harper sat under a twinkling tree, holding a brand new MacBook, her face glowing. Cody grinned ear to ear next to a used but pristine car our parents gifted him. And me? I was in the corner, holding up a red Target scarf, the 1999 price tag still attached. I remember my smile that day, bright and forced, because I believed our parents were stretched thin. I believed they'd done their best. But looking back now, that smile was a desperate attempt to convince myself I wasn't being overlooked. I set the photo aside, and another memory surged forward. At 7, I begged my mom for piano lessons. I can still see my wide-eyed excitement, staring at the shiny keys in the local church, imagining my small fingers playing music someday. But Mom shook her head. "Claire, we can't afford music lessons for both kids. You understand? Harper's taking singing, so piano will have to wait." I nodded, so obedient it hurts to recall. That later never came. 6 months later, Dad took Cody to buy a brand new guitar. I remember Dad's enthusiasm. A boy needs his own passion. Those words cut like a knife. Didn't a girl deserve a passion too? At 13, my class was preparing for an Oregon Marine Science field trip. I saved every penny of my allowance for months, buzzing with excitement. But when I asked my parents to sign the permission slip, Dad shook his head. $400 is too much. Stay home this time. There'll be other chances. I sobbed at the dinner table, but his cold refusal shut down my hopes. 3 weeks later, I saw photos of Dad and Cody on a father-son bonding camping trip, costing twice as much. The image of them by the campfire, holding fishing rods, is burned into my memory as proof that daughter was never a priority. In college, things didn't improve. I studied graphic design at a public university, juggling 3 jobs: barista at Starbucks in the mornings, library assistant at noon, and freelance design at night. Meanwhile, Harper attended a prestigious private school, with rent and car insurance covered by our parents. Cody lived in a dorm, with monthly allowances to focus on studies. Me? I focused on survival, scraping by on utility bills and instant noodles. I remember late nights walking home after shifts, my shadow stretching long under the streetlights. I'd pass Cody's dorm, hearing music and laughter spill out. Sometimes I wondered, was I really part of this family? Sitting among the scattered photos and keepsakes, each memory pierced my heart like a needle. A birthday card for Harper's 16th, with Mom's Princess scrawled inside. The authentic basketball jersey Cody bragged about. My 18th birthday? A small grocery store cake Mom grabbed last minute. I smiled then, convincing myself it was the thought that counted, not the gift. But now I see it wasn't coincidence, it was a pattern of favoritism spanning 28 years. The worst part isn't the lack of money or gifts, the worst part is how long I lied to myself. I made excuses. Mom and Dad must be struggling. Harper needs it more. Cody's still young. I was so compliant I became invisible, a pillar holding up the family while never being seen as an essential part of it. I remembered once, as a kid, asking Mom, "Why does Harper always get more than me?" She laughed, patting my head. You're independent, strong. You don't need as much. Those words became an invisible lock, trapping me in the role of the one who manages, a role I carried for nearly 3 decades. I flipped to the last page of the album, a family photo from Disneyland. Harper beamed in an Elsa princess dress. Cody clutched a new stuffed toy. Where was I? Not in the picture. When I asked, Mom said, "You were busy with your summer internship. If you'd taken time off, you'd have missed an opportunity." Now I know. That trip wasn't last minute. They'd planned it long before, and I was excluded from the start, with an excuse to keep me compliant. Sitting in my small room, the desk lamp illuminating the old photos, I felt my entire childhood questioning me. "Claire, when will you stop staying silent?" My chest felt heavy, but for the first time, instead of making excuses, I faced the truth. This wasn't just about an Alaskan cruise. It was a chain of favoritism, abandonment, and injustice stretching across 28 years of my life. And this time, I knew I couldn't keep enduring. If you've ever felt dismissed in your own family, you might understand this pain. I'm not sharing this to complain, but to say, silence can destroy more than harsh words. What do you think of my memories? If you find this story compelling, comment why. If not, be honest and comment N. Your feedback will let me know if anyone else feels this journey with me. They say, when you dare to set boundaries, it shakes the world around you. I didn't believe that until I became living proof. After discovering the cruise tickets without my name, my family launched what I later learned is called a Flying Monkeys campaign, enlisting relatives and friends to pressure me back into the role of the good, enduring daughter. That first night, my phone rang. Harper's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Claire, you found out, didn't you?" Her voice was soft but tense, like she was reading a rehearsed script. "We were going to invite you, but Mom said you'd understand. You always do." I stayed silent. The words "you always do" stabbed my chest. That was the role they'd cast me in, understanding, enduring, never demanding. I wanted to scream. Why do I always have to understand? Why doesn't anyone try to understand me? Instead, I whispered, "No, Harper, not this time." Then I hung up. The next morning, a text from Cody. "You're overreacting. How much to let this go?" I stared at the message for minutes, rereading it. To Cody, it was all about money. In my brother's eyes, our sibling bond could be reduced to a number. I gave a bitter laugh, then deleted the text. No reply. But the drama didn't end there. A week later, an old classmate texted asking if I was okay. Surprised, I asked why. He sent a screenshot of an email from my mom to several family acquaintances. "Claire is showing signs of mental instability, cutting off contact with family. If you could reach out and talk some sense into her, we'd be grateful." I sat frozen. In a few lines, my mom had painted me as unhinged, someone needing saving. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She'd never protected me, yet repeatedly used me as an excuse to cover her favoritism. Thankfully, I wasn't entirely alone. Melissa, my college best friend, showed up one evening with a bottle of wine and a pizza box. She plopped onto my couch, looking at me with fierce determination. "Claire, you've got to stay sharp. I've seen them take advantage of you too many times, paying their bills, babysitting, sacrificing your plans. What do you get in return? You've seen the truth now. Don't let them drag you back." I nodded, tears blurring my vision. Melissa always knew what I needed to hear. At work, I found empathy too. James, a close colleague, handed me a hot coffee one morning. My family was the same, always favoring my brother, leaving me in the dust. "It makes you think you're the problem. But you're not, Claire. The problem is the system they built." James's words were a mirror to my heart. All these years, I thought I wasn't good enough, wasn't worthy, but I was just trapped in a game I didn't make the rules for. The third person in my healing journey was Dr. Eleanor Warren, my therapist of 6 months. During a session, I poured out everything: the cruise, the calls, the emails, the relentless pressure. Eleanor tilted her head, her voice warm but firm. "Claire, this is a family pattern that's been in place for nearly 3 decades. They're used to you carrying the load and staying quiet. When you refuse, they panic and try to pull you back. But now you have a choice: Keep playing that role or set boundaries to protect yourself. I stared at my clenched hands. For the first time, I understood that refusing wasn't betrayal, it was survival. After that session, I took steps that seemed simple but were monumental. I called my phone carrier and changed my number. I went to the bank and closed the joint account my parents could access. I sat at my computer and wrote a brief email. I can no longer provide financial support. Please respect this decision. I set an auto reply in my inbox. I'm unavailable. Those 3 words, I'm unavailable, became my shield. They weren't just a refusal, they were a declaration. I was no longer open to being used. But taking those steps tore me apart. Part of me felt free, like I'd shed shackles. Another part heard the whisper of a little girl. Am I being too cruel to my family? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark, replaying my mom's stunned look as I walked away, Harper's trembling voice on the phone, Cody's cold text. I tossed and turned until Melissa texted, "Forgiveness doesn't mean self-destruction. Sleep. Tomorrow's still bright." I cried, but this time the tears weren't bitter. They felt like a cleansing, a release of the guilt that had weighed me down for years. The next morning, I looked in the mirror and saw a different Claire. Same messy brown hair, same tired eyes, but behind the exhaustion was a fierce resolve. I knew I'd begun a new chapter, one where I had to learn to say no. And that was just the start. I had no idea bigger challenges were waiting, ones that would force me to prove I could hold my boundaries even in life or death moments. If you want to hear more stories and struggles like mine and feel a connection, you can check out my previous videos on this channel. Some moments in life force you to face the truth about yourself. Moments when every resentment, every hurt, every boundary you've set is tested. For me, that moment came on a chilly autumn evening when I saw my father, Robert, collapse outside a grocery store. I was driving home after a late shift, passing a familiar street. A light rain fell, neon lights from the store's sign reflecting on the wet pavement. In a fleeting moment, I saw a figure slump by the entrance. I slammed on the brakes, my heart racing. As I stepped out, my legs froze. The man crumpled on the ground, clutching his chest, was my dad. For a split second, a storm of emotions hit me. Anger, pain, and a fleeting urge to walk away from the man who'd made me a shadow in our family. But instinct took over. I ran to him, kneeling on the cold tiles. "Dad, can you hear me?" I shook him. His breathing was labored, sweat pouring down his face. I fumbled for my phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands. My voice cracked, but stayed firm. "A man's having a heart attack. We need an ambulance now." While waiting, I did what I'd learned in first aid class. Checked his pulse, kept his airway clear. My heart pounded, memories crashing in. Times Dad rejected me, moments he reserved love for Harper and Cody. Yet my hands pressed his chest, steady and determined. The ambulance's siren pierced the night. Medics rushed over, and I held Dad's hand until they loaded him onto a stretcher. When a nurse asked, "Who's the family? Who'll sign and cover initial costs?" All eyes turned to me. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded, pulling my credit card from my wallet. My signature was shaky but clear, as if declaring, "I won't abandon a life, even if it's someone who abandoned me." At the hospital, I sat in the waiting room, hands ice cold. My mom, Linda, rushed in, her eyes locking on me before filling with tears. She grabbed my hand, voice breaking. "My girl, I thought you'd abandoned us." I took a deep breath. Her words touched my softest spot, but also stirred a bitter truth. They always assumed I'd endure, return, save the day. I looked into her eyes and said slowly, "I'd never abandon a life, Mom, but I won't let anyone take advantage of me anymore." She froze, her hand trembling in mine. She heard the change in my voice, not pleading, not submissive, but the voice of someone who'd learned to set boundaries. When Dad stabilized and moved to recovery, the doctor said he'd narrowly escaped death thanks to timely care. I exhaled, but the relief wasn't joyful. A storm swirled inside. I'd saved Dad. Did that mean I had to resume being the family's lifeline? Mom turned to me, eyes still red. "Claire, see? The family needs you. We need you." I pressed my lips together. Part of me wanted to soften, to believe this was the moment they'd change. But another part knew need didn't always mean love. It could just be another way to pull me back into place. I stood looking at her. I did what I had to. But moving forward, I won't go back to how things were. Leaving the hospital, I stepped into the night. The cold air filled my lungs, and I felt oddly light. I'd proven to myself, compassion didn't mean letting myself be used. I could save Dad and still hold my boundaries. Driving home, I recalled Eleanor's words. Claire, boundaries aren't walls blocking love. They're fences protecting it from being twisted into exploitation. That night, I truly understood her meaning. In my apartment, I sank into a chair, exhaling. My phone buzzed, a text from Harper. Heard you saved Dad. Thank you. But see, the family needs you. Why do you keep pulling away? I stared at the screen. Before I'd have replied, explained, even apologized. Now I typed 3 words. I'm unavailable. Then I turned off my phone. That night, I didn't sleep. I thought of Dad, Mom, Harper, and Cody. I thought of Mom's tears clutching my hand in the hospital. I thought of Dad's blank stare on the stretcher. And I thought of myself, the woman finally daring to separate compassion from blind obedience. I knew this shock was just the first turning point. My family wouldn't easily accept the new Claire, one who says no, who holds boundaries. But whatever storms lay ahead, I was ready. In that moment, I chose. I wouldn't return to being the compliant shadow. They say a real battle doesn't need gunfire, sometimes just a table, a few glances, and carefully rehearsed words. For me, that battle happened in a small Italian restaurant in downtown Portland, where my family gathered to make peace. That evening, I walked in with Melissa by my side. Her hand squeezed mine before we approached the long table where Dad, Mom, Harper, and Cody sat. The stained glass windows cast light on their faces, familiar yet distant. Mom gave a strained smile. Claire, you came. We just want the family together again, like old times. I pulled out a chair, feeling the tension in the air. Melissa sat quietly beside me, her steady gaze reminding me, you're not alone. Dad spoke first, his voice steady like a rehearsed speech. Claire, we've done so much for you. Remember when you were 12 and we paid for your braces? Or when you graduated high school, we got you that used car for college? We sacrificed a lot. You need to appreciate it. Harper nodded. Exactly, Claire. No family's perfect, but we've always wanted the best for you. Cody leaned back, arms crossed, his tone challenging. If you're so upset, just list it out. How much do you think you've been shortchanged? I took a deep breath and opened the leather folder beside me. All eyes followed as I pulled out a thick stack of papers, neatly organized. I placed it on the table, sliding it toward them. This is a record of everything I've given the family over the past 10 years, I said, my voice eerily calm. Total, $37,842, including Dad's hospital bills, Mom's car repairs, Harper's rent, and helping Cody. Numbers don't lie. The table fell silent. I pulled out another sheet, a 15-year timeline of key events I was excluded from. The Disneyland trip, Christmases without me, the recent Alaskan cruise. Yellow highlights covered half the page. Finally, I took a photo from my bag, the $35 jewelry-making kit I'd begged for at 9. Mom had called it too expensive, but a week later bought Harper an American Girl doll. I set the photo on the table, my eyes never leaving them. Mom's voice trembled. Claire, you've misunderstood. We were just trying to balance things. I cut her off, my voice low but sharp. Mom, Dad, name 3 things you've done for me, and only me, that you didn't do for Harper or Cody, just 3. The room froze. The clink of cutlery from nearby tables stopped. I looked at each of them. Dad stared down. Mom bit her lip. Harper studied her hands. Cody's face flushed. No one spoke. That silence was louder than any accusation. Melissa touched my shoulder. I took a breath and continued. I'm not here to collect debts. I'm here to be clear. If you want me in this family, things have to change. I placed one final sheet neatly in the center. These are my conditions. Family therapy, at least 6 sessions, everyone attends. Financial independence, no more borrowing or support. Everyone stands on their own. Public apology. Acknowledge the favoritism and harm I've endured. Time, I need space to heal, no pressure. I looked them in the eyes. If you can't accept this, this is the last time I sit at this table. Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses shake. You don't get to set terms with family. I replied calmly, I'm not setting terms for family. I'm setting boundaries to protect myself. Mom burst into tears. Not the manipulative kind, but real ones. Harper glanced between our parents and me, her eyes confused. Cody stayed defiant, but his bravado faltered slightly. I gathered my papers, stacking them neatly. Think about it, my number hasn't changed. Call me, but only if these conditions are respected. I stood, Melissa close behind. The air behind me was heavy with Mom's sobs and Dad's clumsy attempts to comfort her. Harper softly called my name but didn't follow. Stepping into the night, my lungs felt free. The streetlights glowed golden, a cool breeze ruffling my hair. Melissa squeezed my shoulder, smiling. You know, Claire? You just won, not with shouting, but with calm. I smiled back, a weight lifted. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, I felt I was fighting on my own ground, armed with truth. They say one door closing opens another. I didn't believe it until I moved into my new apartment. A small, light-filled space by the Willamette River, where birds chirp from maple trees in the morning and golden sunlight streams through the windows in the afternoon. I spent weeks making it my own. For the first time, I chose the wall color I loved, a soft turquoise, not the safe, polite cream Mom always insisted on. I hung my own abstract paintings, placed a vase of wild daisies on the kitchen table, and spread a world map rug in the living room. Every detail was my voice, unjudged and unchallenged. In one corner, a photo of me and Melissa from a summer hike sat next to a thick planner. I looked at them each morning to remind myself I'm living a life I chose. The change wasn't just in my space. At work, free from constant family emergencies, I poured my energy into a new branding project. After months of dedication, I was promoted to creative team lead. When my boss put his hand on my shoulder and said, Claire, you deserve this, I felt every late night, every effort, finally recognized. But the most moving moment wasn't work. It was my first Thanksgiving with my chosen family. That morning, I prepared a feast. Roasted turkey, pumpkin pie, mashed potatoes, and cranberry salad, James's favorite. By afternoon, my apartment buzzed with laughter. Melissa and her husband brought red wine. Dr. Eleanor arrived with homemade almond cookies. My widowed neighbor, Mrs. Winters, carried a tray of fragrant baked apples, and James and his boyfriend brought a vibrant bouquet of sunflowers. We gathered around the table, candlelight flickering, spices filling the air. No one interrupted, no one dismissed anyone's stories. Everyone was heard, valued. I raised my glass, voice trembling. Thank you all for showing me family isn't just blood, it's how we treat each other. We clinked glasses, my eyes stung, but these were tears of joy. After dinner, I opened a small box on my bookshelf. It was the jewelry-making kit I'd longed for at 9, the one deemed too expensive, but which I later bought for $35 on Etsy. I picked out turquoise beads, stringing a simple necklace. As it touched my skin, I looked in the mirror and smiled. I'd finally kept a promise to the little girl inside me. Of course, things with my biological family remain complex. I heard Mom started therapy, at first reluctantly, but she's slowly opening up, admitting the favoritism that scarred me. Harper sometimes joins, quietly listening, perhaps realizing she's repeating the same pattern with her own kids. Dad wavers, soft one moment, defensive the next. Cody, as usual, resists and denies everything. But for the first time in years, a door has cracked open. I don't know if it'll lead to full reconciliation, but I'm no longer afraid. I know I can choose distance, choose protection. One quiet evening, I opened my journal and wrote before preparing for my long-dreamed-of Barcelona trip. I chose myself, and I chose forgiveness, but real forgiveness this time. Not blind endurance, but conditional grace with clear boundaries. If my family wants to reconnect, they'll have to meet me on equal ground. If not, I can still live a full, free, happy life. I closed the journal, gazing at the moonlit river outside. A peace I'd never known filled me. This, perhaps, is the happy ending I'd been seeking, not a family suddenly transformed, but finding the strength to no longer be defined by their favoritism. I found the courage to redraw boundaries, to love myself while holding on to compassion. Writing this journey, I realized the greatest lesson wasn't fighting favoritism or injustice, but the power of boundaries and true forgiveness. I learned love doesn't mean accepting exploitation, and forgiveness doesn't mean allowing harm. Family, if it's real, must be built on respect and equality. And if that doesn't come from blood, we can create our own chosen family, people who cherish us with honest hearts. My story might be yours, or anyone who's felt forgotten. If you relate, please comment and share your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more human stories. I believe by walking and listening together, we can become stronger, better versions of ourselves.